Hey guys, Cody Leffler here from OPEX Upper Main Line. I'm here with Ty Fisher. We're going to talk a little bit about periodization today. It's a topic that we, discuss a lot and we work with a lot with our clients, trying to design their program over the course of their year, 2-year goals, 3-year goals, whatever it might be, and how to most effectively help them get to where they want to go. So Ty's going to tell us a little bit more and get the party started.
Right, okay, so periodization, what is it? If you haven't heard that term before, a simple definition for it is going to be regulating your phases of training with respect to volume and intensity with the goal of maximizing your results throughout a training cycle. Whatever that training cycle might be for you, it could be a year for some athletes who only compete once a year, or if you compete every 6 months, that would be your training cycle, or it could be longer or shorter depending on your sport. But if you can figure out what those off and on seasons are relative to your sport athletes or even just your general clients, it's really going to help physically and mentally as well to help prevent some burnout. I think that's a really big key. I know it is for me, and I see it a lot in the gym all the time. So if you can kind of give people periods of lower intensity so they can recover mentally and physically, they tend to do better in the long run.
Awesome. And so as Ty mentioned, the differences when we're looking at clients versus athletes and competitors, and just kind of, being able to categorize there as we go through the rest of this explanation. It's just when we say, clients, we're talking about people looking for general fitness, people looking for balance and wellness and overall health, and who want longevity and to be healthy and live a long, happy life. When we talk about athletes and maybe the sport of fitness athletes and field athletes, we're talking about people who compete in their sport, whatever that may be. That could be field sport, football, baseball, etc. To CrossFitters we might train, or functional fitness athletes in any capacity. So when we're looking at that, we've got to take into consideration what the needs are relative to that individual. And so although the specific needs can be different, the concept and the structure that we create is very similar. And so, just as a marker there for the general population, ultimately, we're designing that periodization, that structure from a health and wellness standpoint, and what that's going to look like for them over a short term that builds into a long-term period of time. And, for the athlete or the competitor, how we're going to progressively structure that period of time, maybe as we consider to be their off season, as we mentioned, and what that's going to look like from essentially, the end of one season through a resting phase, through a building phase, through a peaking phase, and how we lead that person specifically up to that point in their season, or to the day or whatever it may be of competition, so that we can make sure that they're in the right peaking phase and they're primed for optimal performance there.
Right. So as Cody kind of mentioned there can be many different phases within your training cycle or your on and off season. But just to keep it basic, think of it like this. There's only really two phases, training and testing. So obviously there's going to be many different smaller phases within training, but the idea is to think about what you're doing in the gym every day, week after week, month after month throughout the year, and make sure you're going in there with the right goals and not testing constantly, because that'll lead to a state of overreaching and overtraining, and it takes a really resilient person to be able to maintain that over an extended period of time with any sort of long-term results. So by coming up with a plan, failure to plan is a plan to fail, so by coming up with a plan, we can go ahead and maximize our efficiency in our training time to hopefully be in a better place next year than where we are this year. I know for me personally, I've wasted some years of training. That's just nature of the beast, trying to learn some things as you go. But now, with a plan, hopefully I can improve way better than I did before in the same amount of time.
Excellent. Yeah, and so to piggyback off of that, and what I was mentioning before in terms of the peaking and the phases of things, to give you kind of a visual scope, when you have a general versus an athlete, the general may look as simple or as basic as, maybe 4 blocks throughout their year. And we're talking, like I said, between some sort of rest. Again, I'm being very general here, but resting, through what we'll call like the building and accumulating, and that could be your strength and speed development, depending on the athlete and the needs, or the client and the needs, and what we'll call the peak, right? And the peak for the general client could be making sure they're in great shape for an event that they're trying to lead up to once a year, or making sure that they are in the great shape for the beach in the summer, right? Part of fitness is we want to look good naked. So that's, real tangible things that we can wrap our heads around and work together with the client and create these structured plans around that. Whereas with the athlete, the competitor, everybody can kind of wrap their head around sport given the off-season, on-season. So you take a sport such as football. The athlete needs to be primed in late summer leading into the fall, right, when the preseason stuff's going to begin and they're heading into their season. So you're really just finding a way to work backwards, right? So you're going to the final point, figuring out what your end goal is, what your end result needs to be, and how we're going to structure things back from there to create the best possible result. So, that might look a lot more specific in terms of how many blocks and what those blocks look like and how long they last. But ultimately, we're working from, again, sort of that period of rest, which is when one season ends. And as we go into the off season, we're working on building another good foundation, and we're working on developing the skills and the speed we might need over time and the conditioning we might need so that we can peak again when the time is right. So just to give you more of a look here, that could be the difference just in terms of specificity of that block period. So just guys, as a recap real quick, periodization is, as we said, regulating phases of training for maximal results throughout a period of time, condensed period of time. For the competitor, right, ask yourself the question, where are you today versus maybe where you were a year ago? And given there's going to be some improvements with good consistency if your training program is consistent. But I guess my greater question would just be, is it possible that you could have gotten better in a more condensed period of time with the right structure and the right periodization schedule pertaining to your specific needs as an individual? And as Ty had mentioned, if not the case and you're sort of operating at the at will kind of scenario, then we're hoping you're pretty resilient, and you're going to need some resiliency to extend those results and be able to kind of thrive in those environments over a period of time. Take it from a guy who's been really resilient for his career and seeing some of the long-term effects of that now. So be cautious and make sure that you're not overtraining in those places too. Listen to your body. And for the general client, the question would become, is more better? A lot of times we get attached to the concept that we need more and that we need to really overexert to get those maximal results, when in fact with the right structure, when done in the right timing and at the right dosing, intensity and volume are great, but we need to make sure that we have management on those things. And ask yourself, really, what's the long game? What's the end result? And how do I work backwards to get to where I'm going for balance, wellness, and live a long, happy life? So that's really it for today, guys. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.